The hospital's supply closet was small, suffocating. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, their hum mixing with the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. It felt like a world away from everything that had just crumbled. I stood there, gripping my phone tightly, the screen glowing with a message from Henry. Need $2,800. It's urgent. I should have felt angry. I should have been furious, but instead, a heavy numbness washed over me. I looked around, surrounded by boxes of gauze and sterile supplies. This was where I had spent so many hours, trying to save lives, give care, do everything for everyone but myself. But that message, it felt like a final blow. 3 days ago, Henry had told me the family trip to the lake was canceled. Money was tight, he said. Maybe next year. Don't worry about it, babe. I'll take some extra shifts this weekend. We'll get through this together, I'd promised. It wasn't the first time I'd worked overtime to help out to make ends meet. But what I didn't know was that the lake trip wasn't canceled at all. The truth, Henry and his family had gone without me, leaving me behind to carry their burdens. I hadn't said anything. Not then, when I saw the photos on Melissa's Instagram, the family smiling, raising glasses by the water. Henry in the corner, grinning like nothing was wrong. He never even bothered to call or text, not even a "Hey, I know you're working hard, but I miss you." I kept it to myself. I worked. I was used to working, used to giving, used to being the one who made it work. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't about money. It was about something deeper, trust, or rather, the lack of it. The phone buzzed again in my hand. Henry had called twice already. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet, so I just stared at the message again, my mind reeling. Need $2,800. It's urgent. Knows no more. I could hear his voice in my head, the way he'd asked so many times before. Mom and Dad are struggling, babe. It's just a temporary thing, okay? Just for now. But the truth was, it wasn't just temporary. It never had been. For 3 years, I had sent that money faithfully every single month. $2,800 for taxes, for property repairs, for them. And every time Henry assured me it would all be okay. It was just a little more help, just a little longer, just until they got back on their feet. They never did, and I was exhausted. I wanted to believe in the person I'd married, but the cracks were showing, cracks I couldn't ignore anymore. Flashback 7 years ago. I remembered the first time we had talked about money. 7 years ago, we stood in front of a courthouse, wearing our best clothes, his borrowed suit, my mother's dress altered to fit, laughing about our budget of $300. We didn't need much, we said. Love was free, right? His family had seemed so charming back then. Nancy, his mother, bringing over casseroles to our little studio apartment. Robert, his father, helping us move in secondhand furniture. Melissa, his sister, calling me sister from the very first day we met. Everything felt so perfect. But I never noticed the subtle ways they used me, the slow way they started to depend on me financially. I'd helped at first, willingly, because I wanted to be part of the family. I didn't question it when Henry asked me to pay the taxes on the lake house, because we were married, right? It was family, and family helps family. But slowly, over time, those small requests grew into something more. A little extra here, a little more there. A $500 check for the property taxes, then $1,000, $2,000, and it just kept growing. Mom and Dad will pay us back, don't worry, Henry would reassure me, but they never did. Present day, Lauren's realization. Now, as I stood there in the supply closet, it all hit me at once. All those sacrifices, all those weekend shifts I picked up to pay for a family I wasn't even invited to be a part of. All the moments I had missed. The laughter at the lake, the shared meals, the memories made while I worked myself to exhaustion. I wasn't just supporting Henry's family, I was enabling them. I had been the ATM, the one who made everything possible for them. I'd worked hard, I'd given everything, but what did I get in return? Nothing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the truth. My marriage was built on lies, financial lies, emotional lies. The very foundation of everything we'd built was cracked, and I wasn't going to be the one to keep filling the hole. The phone buzzed again, another call from Henry. I looked down at it for a moment before swiping it away. My heart pounded. This was it. the moment I would make the decision that would change everything. I've had enough, I whispered to myself. The message, the texts, the family vacation I wasn't even invited to, it was the last straw. I knew what I had to do. No more, not one more cent, not one more sacrifice. I picked up my phone and typed a response. Ask your family. I stood there in the supply closet, the phone still in my hand, the last message to Henry hanging in the air between us. Ask your family. My heart raced as the weight of what I'd just done settled on me. I had never been one to give up easily. I'd worked for everything I had. But right then, as I leaned against the cold metal shelves, I could feel a shift. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about me. Flashback the first time I helped. It all started so innocently, just a small request, one I never questioned. Henry had come home one evening, the weight of the world in his eyes, and told me that Nancy had mentioned the property taxes on the lake house were going up. She's stressed, Lauren, Henry had said, rubbing his temples. You know how Mom gets when things aren't going right. I just don't know how we can help. It seemed like a simple thing to do. After all, the lake house was where Henry had spent his childhood summers. It was full of family memories. The place had always been important to him. So, when he asked me if we could help out just this one time, I didn't hesitate. No problem, babe, I said, grabbing my checkbook. I can help just this once. I didn't think much of it. The lake house was important to Henry, and I wanted to be there for him. I didn't realize that was just the beginning. The growing requests. A week later, the same conversation played out again. This time, it was for some repairs, a leaky roof that needed fixing before the summer rain came. They said the roof can't wait, Lauren. The cost is a bit more than we expected. How much more? I asked, trying to sound calm. About $1,000, it's urgent. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my purse, went to the bank, and sent the money. Henry was so grateful. His relief was evident, and for a brief moment, I felt like I was part of something, part of a family. He kissed me on the cheek that night and promised we would be all right. But then the amounts kept growing. Little by little, I found myself paying for more and more. Nancy would drop by, always with a hug and a casserole, and mention something about another small issue at the lake house. The water heater broke, the plumbing was outdated, there was damage to the dock, and the list went on. Each time, Henry would tell me, "It's just a temporary thing, Lauren, just until things get better." I never saw the end. The payments started to feel like a weight I carried alone. Henry promised we'd be reimbursed eventually, but those promises never came true. I would bring it up, but he'd dismiss it. It's just family, Lauren, they've helped us before, we owe them. But we weren't getting anything in return, not even an invitation to family dinners. The first hint of favoritism. At first, it seemed harmless. The family wasn't being outright rude or dismissive, but as time went on, I started noticing something I shouldn't have ignored. One evening, I overheard a conversation between Henry and his sister, Melissa. They were in the other room, talking about the lake house, and Henry was reassuring her about the taxes and other expenses. But when I walked in, Melissa gave me a strange, tight smile. "Oh, Lauren," she said in a way that didn't feel quite genuine. "You know, we can never repay you for everything you've done for us. You're a saint, really." The word saint felt hollow. She had a way of saying it, a way of making it feel like a favor rather than a shared responsibility. I had been helping for so long, but the reality was, I was the one always giving. As time passed, I realized how much the family relied on me, and how much I depended on Henry's assurances that we were doing the right thing. But then the guilt started to feel suffocating. The sense of obligation to Henry's family was overwhelming. It was as though they had become entitled to my money, to my hard work. And Henry, my own husband, was the one enabling it. The family's indifference. It wasn't just the money. I started noticing the way his family treated me. Nancy and Robert, his parents, would call me sweetheart when they needed help with something, but they never asked how I was doing. They only seemed to care about what I could provide. And when they did offer anything, it was always in the form of a compliment. "You're so generous, Lauren. You're such a good wife." But those compliments felt empty, like they were simply a way to make me feel better about giving them everything I had. It wasn't just financial anymore. It was emotional manipulation. They wanted me to keep giving, and Henry, my own husband, was blind to it all. I was so deep in this role of helpful daughter-in-law that I couldn't see that I was being taken advantage of. And then it hit me. I wasn't just helping, I was enabling. I was funding their lifestyle while being excluded from it. I was invisible, just a paycheck. That was the truth. The cracks deepen. At some point, it became too much. Henry had promised me that the payments would stop soon. He said his parents would be fine once they got back on their feet. But it never happened, and the more they took, the less I was included. I would watch from the sidelines as Henry's family gathered, posting pictures online, enjoying vacations, holidays, weekends at the lake house. I wasn't just excluded from these gatherings, I was forgotten. They never thought to invite me, to include me. And when I asked Henry why, his response was always the same. "Oh, they just assumed you were working, Lauren. You always work." It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. They didn't want me there. They just wanted my money, and I let them have it. I sat there in the hospital, numb, reflecting on everything. Every transfer, every lie, every moment I spent working myself to the bone for a family who only saw me as an ATM. Then the phone buzzed again. It was Henry. "Need $2,800. It's urgent." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I couldn't keep doing this. I didn't respond. Not yet, but I was done. I was finally done. The phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Henry's name lit up my screen each time. I let it ring until it stopped, only for it to buzz again, as if he knew I was ignoring him. I stood there in the supply closet, my pulse racing. My eyes were locked on the screen, the words "Need $2,800. It's urgent," flashing in front of me like a warning, a reminder of everything I'd given and everything I'd lost. Part of me wanted to pick up, to hear him out, maybe give him one more chance to explain, but I knew there was nothing he could say that would make this okay. There was no explanation for the lake house trip, no excuse for how my sacrifice had been met with betrayal. I felt the burn of anger in my chest, but more than that, I felt something else. Relief. Relief that I had finally made a decision. Enough is enough. Flashback, the buildup. I remember the moment the lake house became more than just a family request. It became a financial obligation I could never escape. It wasn't just about the property taxes anymore. It wasn't just about helping Henry's parents through a rough patch. It was about something darker, the expectation. The expectation that I would always come through, that I would never question, that I would never say no. I had stopped questioning when the $2,800 transfers became routine. My work schedule was a blur of 12-hour shifts, weekends I barely saw Henry, and when I did, it was to hear about his family's endless needs. Each time, he would reassure me it was temporary, that things would get better, that we were in this together. But all that time, all that money, I started to feel like I was the one paying the price. Paying for Henry's family's lifestyle, their vacations, their lake house. I had lost track of the number of times I'd gone without, trying to make ends meet while they lived their lives. While they posted photos of their perfect family weekends, without me. Present day, the moment of truth. I walked out of the supply closet, my phone still silent in my hand. The fluorescent lights of the ICU hallway flickered above me. The constant beeping of machines, the hurried footsteps of nurses and doctors, it all seemed so far away. I was physically here, but my mind was a million miles away, consumed by everything I'd just realized. Henry's family had never wanted me, not really. They wanted my money. They needed it, and I had given it to them without question. I moved through the next few hours like I was on autopilot, tending to patients, filling out charts, running medications. But none of it mattered. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I had let this go on for far too long. The text. Finally, I couldn't ignore it any longer. Henry's last text blinked on my screen again. Need $2,800. It's urgent. I stepped outside into the staff courtyard, away from the chaos, needing just a moment to breathe. The air outside was crisp, the faint smell of disinfectant still lingering on my clothes. I felt the weight of everything pressing on my chest, but at the same time, I felt light. I could see the path ahead more clearly now. I typed the message carefully, knowing that once I sent it, there would be no going back. Ask your family. I pressed send, and for a long moment, I just stared at the screen, waiting for his response. Henry's call. The phone rang immediately. I didn't pick up. He called again, and again. My hand hovered over the phone, my chest tight with anticipation. I had already made my decision. I couldn't go back. I wouldn't. I let it ring, 3 more times, and then I heard his voicemail beep. I knew it wasn't over. I knew he wouldn't let this go that easily. I could almost hear his voice in my head, that familiar mix of guilt and desperation. Lauren, please, please just let me explain. It's not what you think. Please pick up the phone. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. I wanted to scream at him for every lie, for every time he said we'd get through this together, and then excluded me from his life. I wanted to tell him how much I'd sacrificed, how much of me had gone into this relationship, only to find out that he never saw me as an equal partner. But instead, I took a deep breath and made my way back into the ICU. There were patients who needed me, people who valued me, who didn't see me as a wallet, a source of endless funds. I was done with this. The confrontation. That night, after my shift, I came home to an empty apartment. Henry wasn't there, as expected. He had likely gone to the lake, to his family, to them. I moved through our apartment like a stranger in my own life. The quiet was suffocating. The space that had once felt like home now felt hollow. I thought back to the first time I'd walked through this place, excited to build a life with Henry, to create a home. But now, it just felt like a tomb. And then, it hit me. I had been living in a lie for years. I had been enabling a family that had never truly seen me. I sat down at our kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into the bank account. It was all there, 3 years of transfers, $2,800 every single month, no exception. I snapped screenshots of everything. The evidence was undeniable. Just as I was about to save everything to a folder, Henry walked in. He looked normal, too normal. He was holding a bottle of wine, his usual smile plastered on his face. "Hey babe, you home?" he asked, his voice light. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in a long time. "How was the lake?" I asked, my voice flat. His eyes shifted. I saw the guilt flash in them, but he quickly recovered. "It was fine," he said. "Everyone missed you, babe, you know that." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, I bet. I saw the photos, the ones where everyone was there but me." His smile faltered. "Lauren, I'm sorry, it wasn't like that, I didn't." "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" I interrupted, standing up. "You lied to me, Henry. You told me the trip was canceled, and now you want me to keep sending you money like it's no big deal." "Lauren, please, I can explain," he said, his voice desperate. I shook my head. "No, Henry, no more explanations, no more money, no more lies." He stood there, frozen. His face went pale. I could hear the desperation in his voice when he spoke next. "Lauren, don't do this. Please, we're a family. I need you. You don't understand." I met his eyes, and for the first time, I wasn't seeing my husband. I was seeing someone I barely knew, someone who had betrayed me and my trust. "I'm done," I said. "I'm done being your ATM. You can figure it out with your family. Ask them, I'm done." I walked out, leaving him standing there. His voice echoed after me, but I didn't turn around. The chaos of the ICU had never felt so familiar, or so alien. I was running on fumes, moving through the day like I always did. Checking vitals, managing medications, calming panicked family members. But today, the machines beeped louder, the corridors felt colder, and the weight of everything, the betrayal, the lies, the decisions I'd made, pressed on me more than ever. It had been 3 days since I'd confronted Henry, 3 days since I sent him that final message. "Ask your family." I still hadn't heard from him, but I had heard from everyone else. Everyone, Melissa, Nancy, Robert, even Jake, who I barely knew, they all had the same message: "You're breaking the family apart." I had gotten texts, calls, and even a few Instagram DMs, each one guilt-tripping me into coming back. It was the same old story. Family is everything, they said. You'll regret this. But I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. The trauma call. The emergency radios crackled to life. Multiple vehicle collision on I-75, at least 6 cars involved, several criticals inbound, ETA 3 minutes. The adrenaline hit like a wave, sweeping away the heaviness that had been hanging over me. It was a welcome distraction, a reminder of why I did what I did. This was my purpose, not the lies, not the endless requests, the work. I rushed to the trauma bay, my heart still pounding from the confrontation with Henry. The rest of the shift was a blur, broken limbs, punctured lungs, blood everywhere. The moment the first stretcher rolled through the automatic doors, I shifted into autopilot. A teenager, maybe 16, blood dripping from his head, unconscious. I snapped into action, my hands steady as I helped push the gurney into trauma room 3. The paramedics rattled off his vitals as we worked to stabilize him. I barely registered their words. Nothing mattered except getting him through this. I was doing what I was trained to do, focusing on the task at hand, trying not to let my mind wander. But my thoughts kept straying back to Henry, to the lake house, to the lies, to everything I had done to protect his family while they treated me like an outsider. The close call. The chaos escalated from there, another stretcher, another patient. But this one was different. I had barely caught my breath from stabilizing the first patient when the next crash victim was wheeled in. Another teenager, this time a girl. She was unconscious, bleeding from several wounds. We worked quickly, my hands slick with blood as I inserted a catheter, adjusted the IV, double-checked the heart rate. My brain was working overtime, trying to separate the professional from the personal. But I couldn't. Every step I took felt mechanical. Each breath I took felt heavier, and with every passing second, I felt the emotional exhaustion rising inside me, mixing with the physical stress of the trauma. And then it happened. As I was checking the girl's breathing tube, something went wrong. Her vitals flatlined. Code blue. Code blue in Trauma 3. Dr. Martinez's voice echoed through the trauma bay, but it was drowned out by the pounding in my ears. I reacted instantly, my hands moving with a mix of muscle memory and sheer panic. I grabbed the defibrillator, my hands shaking. My thoughts were fragmented, caught between the patient in front of me and the life I was leaving behind at home. For a second, everything seemed to blur, the beeping monitors, the flurry of nurses and doctors around me, the chaos of the ICU and the chaos of my life. But I kept working. We all did. The girl's heart restarted. The emotional aftershock. The next few hours felt like a blur. I worked through the trauma like I always did, but this time, it wasn't just the physical exhaustion weighing me down. It was the emotional toll of everything I had just uncovered. I had been running on fumes. I had been giving everything, working extra shifts, carrying Henry's family's financial burden, carrying the weight of their indifference. But I realized, as I sat there, my hands still shaking, that I had been giving myself away in ways I couldn't afford anymore. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was tired. So tired. Tired of giving everything for people who never cared enough to give anything back. Tired of being the one who always had to make sacrifices, the one who always had to hold it together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run away from it all. But instead, I turned to the girl who had just survived, who, against all odds, had come back from the brink of death. The mother rushed in moments later, her face pale with worry. When she saw her daughter's chest rise and fall, the tears came. She collapsed, and I caught her, holding her steady as she whispered over and over, "Thank you, thank you." And in that moment, I realized, I had done something real today. I had saved someone. I had been the one to make a difference, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The phone called. The shift ended later that night. My feet ached, my back burned, and I was emotionally drained, but for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. I had been a nurse, and I had been a wife, but the wife I had been was gone now. I walked into our apartment, greeted by the same silence I had left earlier that morning. Henry's absence felt heavy in the air. I looked at his things, the shirt he'd worn this morning, his coffee cup still sitting on the counter. The phone buzzed. I hesitated, staring at the screen. Henry's name flashed again. My heart raced, but this time it wasn't with anxiety. It was with something else, something new, strength. I picked up the phone. Lauren, Henry's voice cracked, sounding more desperate than I'd ever heard him. I don't know what happened. Can we just talk? Please, I need you. I can't lose you. We've been through so much, I'm sorry. His words were familiar. His voice, the same one that had comforted me through every family crisis, every financial struggle. The same voice that had always promised everything would be okay. But now, as I stood there in the middle of our apartment, I knew something for sure. I wasn't the same woman who had been there when this started. I was done being the one who had to carry everything. Henry, I said, my voice steady, this isn't about you, it's about me. I've given everything for this family, and you never once cared about me. I'm done. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, trying to find the right words. But I didn't wait, I hung up. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, the weight of the decision settling in. And then, just as I was about to put the phone down, a text message from Melissa popped up. I didn't need to read it to know what it was. But I opened it anyway. Lauren, we need to talk. You're hurting everyone. You don't understand what you've done. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking once more, but this time not out of fear. I was done. And I wasn't going back. The hospital never slowed down. Even in the dead of night, the hum of activity was constant. Doctors packing the hallways, nurses calling out orders, and the steady beeping of monitors. But despite the chaos, I was floating in a fog, my mind consumed by everything I had left behind. I barely noticed the cold air of the staff break room or the buzz of fluorescent lights above me as I sat alone at the table, the silence wrapping itself around me like a heavy blanket. The cup of coffee in front of me was cold. I hadn't touched it. My phone sat on the table, its screen cracked from where I had dropped it earlier in the day. The messages from Henry, from his family, kept pinging on my phone. You need to understand, we're family. I didn't need to understand. I knew exactly what they were trying to do. They were trying to guilt me into coming back, into forgiving them. But nothing they said could change the reality. I was done. Flashback, evidence of financial abuse. As I sat there, I couldn't help but replay the last few months in my mind. It wasn't just the emotional toll that had gotten to me, it was the financial manipulation. I had been drowning in debt, trying to cover for Henry's family while they went on their trips, lived their lives, and never once invited me to join. I'd paid $2,800 a month for 3 years, money that could have been used for us, but instead it had gone to cover Henry's family's mistakes. Every transfer, every request, every word from Henry telling me it was temporary, it would be fine, we'd get it back soon, it had been a lie. But now I had something concrete. I had the evidence. The next morning, I found the bank statements and started going through them with methodical precision. I wasn't sure what exactly I was looking for at first. Maybe I was hoping for some sign that things hadn't been as bad as they seemed. Maybe I was hoping to find one last excuse to forgive Henry, but there was nothing. Just a trail of money, months and months of my hard-earned salary disappearing into Henry's family's pockets. I opened my laptop and uploaded all the bank statements into a secure folder. The folder had a simple name, Truth. I saved everything, the dates, the amounts, the labels, property tax help, family support, emergency fund. But it was all the same thing, my money, my sacrifices. I knew I could never let it go. I could never go back to pretending everything was okay. The X-rays. The day dragged on. I moved through my shift with the automatic precision of someone who had been in the field too long, who had seen too many things. But this time, everything felt different. I wasn't just going through the motions, I was making sure I didn't forget anything. I was filing away everything I could for the future. I was preparing for what came next. At one point, Dr. Martinez called me over to help with a series of X-rays. A patient had been brought in after a car accident, and I was needed to assist with the read-through. As I stared at the X-ray, trying to focus on the black and white lines that would determine the patient's course of treatment, I couldn't help but think of all the times I had been the one left out of the picture, left in the dark, while Henry's family made their decisions without me. The image of the X-ray was a blur, but the emotions behind it were sharp. I felt like the cracked bones in front of me, broken, fractured, needing care, but with no one to help. I had spent so much of my life caring for others, but no one had ever cared for me in return. Dr. Martinez's intervention. That night, as I stood in the hallway, feeling the weight of everything come crashing down, Dr. Martinez approached me. "Lauren," he said, his voice low, "you okay? You've been off all day. I know the shifts are tough, but you seem different." I looked at him, and for a moment I almost broke. I almost let the tears fall, but I couldn't. I wasn't going to cry, not in front of him, not in front of anyone. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. But he didn't buy it. "You don't look fine. Look, I've known you for a while now. You don't let things bother you, but this is something different." He paused for a moment before continuing. "If you ever need to talk outside of this, just know you've got people who care about you here. You're not alone." I wanted to thank him, but the words got caught in my throat. What was I supposed to say? That I had been deceived for years, that the man I married had taken everything from me, that I was finally learning how to stand up for myself. "Thanks," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I appreciate it." The breaking point. That night after my shift, I went home, or at least I tried to go home. The apartment felt even emptier than before. Henry's things were scattered around, his coffee mug still sitting on the counter, his jacket draped over the back of the couch. I had been the one to take care of this place, to make it a home, and now it felt like a prison. I opened my laptop again. I stared at the folder on the screen. Truth. I started reviewing the screenshots, each one a reminder of everything I had given, everything I had lost. And then my phone buzzed again. Another text from Henry, another cry for help. "Lauren, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, I love you." The words were so familiar, but they no longer held power over me. They were empty. I put my phone down and turned away from the screen. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would be fine. The doorbell rang. I froze. I didn't expect anyone, not like this, not now. I stood there, my heart hammering in my chest. The last few days had been nothing but an emotional roller coaster, but now, standing at the door, I knew it wasn't over. I opened the door. And there he was, Henry. "Lauren, please," he said, his voice shaking. "Please, just hear me out." But I had heard enough. "I've already made my decision," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. "I'm done." The door slammed shut behind me, the finality of it ringing in my ears. Henry's voice echoed, but I didn't look back. I wasn't going to let him guilt-trip me again. I wasn't going to let him back in, not after everything. "Lauren, please," he had begged, his voice breaking with emotion. "You don't understand, we're family, you're my family." I'd heard it all before. The endless pleas, the promises that things would change, that we'd get through it, but nothing had changed. He hadn't changed. And now, standing on the other side of that door, I felt something that I hadn't in a long time, peace. Flashback, the family manipulation. I had always been the good daughter-in-law. At first, I had been happy to help, to be part of their family's legacy. I thought that was what marriage was about, sacrificing for each other, supporting each other. But the truth was, I had been sacrificing while Henry's family took everything from me. I remember the first time Henry's parents, Nancy and Robert, had dropped by our apartment unexpectedly. Nancy had that smile that made me feel like I was doing something important, something right. "You're such a blessing, Lauren," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You know, Robert and I were just talking about how you're the daughter I never had. We never had a daughter, you know. But you, oh, you're just so kind, so generous." I had smiled, trying to ignore the pit in my stomach. But it wasn't kindness. It wasn't generosity. It was manipulation. But I didn't see it then. I saw it as love. That's what they wanted me to see. But all they wanted was my money. And Henry, he was too blind to see what was happening. He saw his family in pain, and he believed the lie that I could fix it. The truth sets. I had wanted to believe it was all temporary. That someday, things would balance out, that Henry's family would get back on their feet, and we could have our life back. But here I was, standing in the middle of my apartment, feeling the weight of everything I had given. The $2,800 each month for the past 3 years, the weekends I'd sacrificed to cover their bills, the moments I had missed with my own family, all of it gone. And now the realization had hit me. I had been nothing more than a tool, a means to an end. Henry's family had used me, and I had let them. Susan steps in. The next morning, I was back at work. The trauma from the last few days still weighed on me, physically and emotionally. I was tired, worn out. I had given everything to Henry and his family, but today, I felt like I was finally starting to take something back. That's when Susan pulled me aside. "Lauren," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I've been meaning to talk to you." I looked at her, feeling the exhaustion from the past few days, but something in her tone made me stop. "Are you okay? I've been watching you and I can tell something's off," she continued. "I know you're going through a lot, but I want you to know you're not alone. If you need to talk, I'm here." Susan had become a sort of unspoken ally. She had been through similar struggles in her own life, and it didn't take long for me to see that she understood me in ways most people didn't. "I don't know what to do anymore, Susan," I admitted, feeling the weight of the truth spill out. "I've been giving, and it's never enough. I'm always the one making sacrifices. But I'm not even part of their family. I'm just the one who pays the bills." Her expression softened. "You're not just a paycheck, Lauren, you never were, but that's the problem, you've been treated like one, and you don't deserve that." I wanted to cry, but I held it together. Susan's words cut deep, but they also brought clarity. She was right. I wasn't just a bank account. I wasn't just an ATM, I was a person. And I had the right to stand up for myself. The confession. That evening, after my shift, I went home. I had no idea what to expect from Henry when I saw him, but I knew one thing: I had to confront him. Now. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, his face etched with guilt. The moment he saw me, he stood up. "Lauren," he began, his voice soft, "I know I've messed up, I know I've hurt you. And I'm sorry, I can't lose you, I can't lose us." I stood still, not saying anything. I wasn't going to fall for it, not this time. "You don't get it, Henry," I finally said, my voice steady but firm. "It's not just about the money, it's about everything else. You lied to me, you made me believe in something that wasn't real. You've been using me and I've been letting you. And your family, they've been doing the same thing." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "No," I said, "it's done, I'm done." His eyes widened, his face falling. "Lauren, please, you're my wife, you're my family." I shook my head. "No, Henry, you have a family, and it's not me, it never was." The silence between us was thick, the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had made my decision. And then, just as I turned to walk out, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Nancy. "I need to talk to you, Lauren, please don't do this. You're destroying our family, we need you." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. I had already made up my mind. I had already taken back my life. But the message from Nancy, it struck a nerve I didn't expect. The days after I walked out of that apartment felt like a blur, but it wasn't the chaos of the world around me that was overwhelming. It was the peace inside of me, a peace I hadn't known for a long time. The weight of carrying Henry's family's burden had lifted, and while it left an emptiness, it also created room for something else. Freedom. I had left behind a life full of expectations, expectations that had never been my own. Now, I had nothing but time to rebuild. But first, I needed to heal. Therapy, a safe space. A week after I left, I sat in a small office, surrounded by soft lighting and the smell of lavender. The space felt safe. The therapist, Dr. Sarah Chin, was warm, understanding. She had an ease about her, a calm that made it easier for me to open up. I hadn't planned on saying everything on that first visit. I figured I'd just tell her the basics, explain that I had been manipulated financially and emotionally. But the moment I spoke, the floodgates opened. The words came tumbling out, and for the first time in years, I let myself feel everything I had been suppressing. The resentment, the anger, the exhaustion, the pain of being betrayed by someone I loved and by his family. Dr. Chin listened, never interrupting, just nodding as she took notes. Her presence was comforting, but it also made the truth sharper. The realization that I had been financially abused by my own husband, that I had allowed myself to be isolated, was harder to confront than I thought it would be. But I knew it was necessary. I feel stupid, I admitted, my voice cracking. How could I not see it? How could I have let this go on for so long? Dr. Chin smiled softly, her voice gentle but firm. Lauren, you were in love. Love can cloud our judgment. And sometimes, when we're raised to think that family is everything, it becomes difficult to see the manipulation until it's too late. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was alone in this. For the first time, I wasn't just an accomplice in my own pain. I was finally seeing things clearly. Accountability and the family. It wasn't just about therapy. It was about taking action, setting boundaries, and holding people accountable. I had spent years enabling Henry's family, allowing them to drain me physically, emotionally, and financially. But now, it was my turn to hold them accountable. The first step was setting the boundaries with Henry. I had already made it clear that I was done, but I had to make sure he understood that this wasn't a temporary decision. I wasn't going back. There would be no reconciliation unless he took responsibility for what he had done. He needed to own his part in the manipulation. And I wasn't the only one who needed to set boundaries. Henry's family had crossed lines too many times. I had let them treat me like an ATM, and I had to let them know that I was no longer playing their game. I reached out to Melissa, the sister who had once seemed like a friend, only to be betrayed along with the rest of them. I'm done, Melissa, I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. Your family can no longer rely on me. I've been funding your life for too long, and I'm not doing it anymore. You can find someone else to pay for the lake house, and please stop trying to guilt-trip me into coming back. I could feel the tension on the other end of the line. Melissa tried to argue, to manipulate me like she always had. But I stood firm. I wasn't going to back down. I'm done, I repeated, louder this time, more sure of myself. And for the first time, she didn't argue. She didn't have anything left to say. The scar and the lesson. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. I found myself moving into a new apartment, a small but cozy place just a few blocks from the hospital. It was quiet, peaceful, and filled with the fresh air I hadn't known I needed. I furnished it slowly, piece by piece, choosing things I loved, not things I felt obligated to buy for someone else's family. I had learned so much in those weeks, but the most important lesson was this: I was enough. I didn't need to sacrifice my happiness, my health, or my financial stability to be loved. I didn't need to be the one to always make things work for everyone else. As for the scar that Henry and his family had left on me, I realized it wasn't something I could just forget or erase. It was a part of me, a part of my journey. It had shaped who I was becoming, a woman who no longer accepted disrespect, who no longer allowed herself to be used. But the scar didn't define me. It was just part of the story. A new beginning. And so I moved forward, slowly but surely. I took each day at my own pace, letting go of the anger and regret that had been eating at me. There was no rush. For once, I didn't have to carry anyone else's burden. I focused on my work, but this time I wasn't running away from anything. I was standing tall, learning to say no without feeling guilty. I was investing in myself, in my peace, in my happiness, in my future. A few months after I left Henry, I took a solo trip to Sedona. I had always dreamed of going there, of hiking the red rocks, experiencing the quiet beauty that everyone talked about. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for doing something for myself. As I stood at the top of Cathedral Rock, looking out over the valley below, I thought about how far I had come. I had been the one to put my life on hold for so long. But now, I was living for me. I was the one who had taken control of my future, and I was no longer afraid to be alone, because I wasn't alone anymore. As I stood there, watching the sun set over the rocks, I realized something. Sometimes, you have to let go of the past to make room for your future. It's not easy. It takes time, but the most important thing is that you take control. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself. If you've ever been in a situation where you've had to let go of toxic relationships or financial abuse, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt trapped by family obligations? How did you find the strength to say enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more empowering stories like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.